Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today it is time to have a look at another user mission and model. Now this one is made by Atsuko, and Atsuko also gives appreciation to Gallonmates, who is the lad behind the F-100 and also the early air-to-air missiles that we had a look at last year. So Atsuko has made an interesting jet. This is the Saab 38 Sparv. And obviously it isn't fully finished, but you can definitely see where the ideas are going. And there are two factors behind why this thing is interesting. But first of all, if you want a link to this user mission and model, there will be a link in the description towards it. Therefore you can download it yourself. Basically all you have to do is download it, extract the files, take those extracted files, mainly the content and user missions, drag them into your War Thunder folder that you have, and bingo bango, go to user missions and it will be there in the game. It's as simple as that. So, let's have a chat about why this is a very significant Swedish plane, at least when it comes to War Thunder, and what are the two interesting attributes that could really revolutionize the game in a good or a bad way, depending on where you sit on the side of the fence. So, first of all, a little bit of history. The Saab 38, it was a single-engine jet trainer and attack aircraft which was planned by Saab during the 1970s. The project was actually a collaboration between Saab and the Italian aircraft manufacturer Ermacchi, I think is how you say it, or Ermacchi, and it was to replace the Saab 105 jet trainer that the Swedish Air Force were using. The aircraft never got past the drawing board though, and it was actually cancelled in 1979 in favour of a more advanced Saab JAS-39 Gripen fighter. So this is, in all intents and purposes, a paper design that we see before us. A Swedish paper design. And this is what I mean by interesting concepts and thoughts. Now, my opinion when it comes to paper designs is I'm not a fan. The reason for this is you can make up statistics about them. It is very hard to report if they are either doing too well or too badly, because basically you can stick two fingers up at the person reporting it, because you can just say that the values are made up. One of the largest issues that I personally think at top tier there is right now is the fact that a lot of the vehicles are, well, they harbor classified material. Generally when it comes to the armor, it is classified, and also when it comes to the ammunition, even though we can closely work out what it's supposed to do, it isn't always on the books exactly what it does. So because of these main factors, you could also say the engines as well is another thing. But the reason why I bring up modern vehicles is because we already have a bunch of them in game. I mean, we just got a new slew of them, the M1A1, the Leopard 2A5, the Challenger 2, and these are all completely classified vehicles. The Challenger 1 is a classified vehicle, so is the M1 Abrams. We were at this point about a year ago in update 1.77 Advancing Storm, and I personally said that I wasn't happy that we were going into this because of this similar fact. The fact is, if you have bug reports, if you have different sources, they can be struck down as being said, well, you don't know what we know. And we've seen this many times when it comes to historical data for these newer vehicles. And the same thing could be said for stuff like this, the Saab 38. Now, I know a lot of people are completely fine with the idea of unhistorical vehicles. I think it's actually a really healthy conversation to have. Should we have stuff which is paper in the game? Is stuff like the Panther 2 okay? How about the R2Y2s? Should it be used to fill gaps? Should it be used to make sure that, you know, it's balanced at every tier for each nation? How about, how far do we go? How about half of a prototype stage? You know, stuff like, how about a chassis of a vehicle instead of just a turret? What if we just have an engine? What if we have all the parts made but not put together? There are all these factors that have to be taken into account, and it becomes a debate of where you draw the line. Now for me, I like drawing the line at built and tested to some degree. and that means that all of the facets, the main facets, such as the armor, such as the gun, such as the ammunition, and the engine, have all been tested to a sufficient degree while put together. That is my standard when it comes to War Thunder. Now obviously this isn't the standard of everybody, and I think there is definitely room, now that we've seen more of these modern vehicles, we've seen the Panther II and the Tiger II 105 be allowed to exist on top of the R2Y2s, and some other machines such as the BF-109 Zwilling, which is literally fake news when it comes to what it was supposed to be. At least if you look, that's always the interesting one, the Zwilling. So the Zwilling was taken off sale a while back, and if you had a look at the two Zwillings that were supposed to be built, none of them were the one that we got in game, and even the proposed one from the manufacturer also wasn't the one in game. It was just an interesting thing. But the main thing is it really depends on what you see War Thunder as. Do you see War Thunder as a game where you can play historical vehicles, not necessarily against their historical counterparts, but instead in a free-flowing environment that can be changed constantly? Or do you see it as more of a game which should explore all ideas, which should expand all over the place? And since the recent increase in popularity of the more modern vehicles, when it comes to supersonic jets, we had a good bump, and then of course all the modern vehicles from last year and this year, it seems to me that people are okay with these designs as long as they have some backing to them. So the Saab 38 Sparv sits in an interesting place because it technically does have backing. It was on the drawing board, it was something that was going to be built if required, but at the end of the day it wasn't. And then we have another thing to discuss. So, we have what I would class as the major nations of World War II in game. I know a lot of people will quibble about other nations, but for me, when we have a look forward, one of the interesting things about the modernization that we've seen in the game is there are countries which come more to the forefront. Now, I've personally done a few videos with some key members of the Swedish tech tree community and the international tech tree community overall, and had a chat about vehicles which would be, lovely to see. Mainly ground vehicles though. But one thing that people forget is Sweden was incredibly prolific when it came to its ground vehicles and also its air vehicles and even its naval stuff. The place where they struggle when it comes to War Thunder will be the helicopters parts, but there are still a few you could throw in there, especially if we use the pre-existing rules that we've seen in the game. But the main thing is, with Sweden, it is looking like one of the options which would be expanded upon if we got a new nation in game. The discussions that I've heard, the debates, have been between this nation and of course China. Because China has a ton of vehicles. A lot of them would be, at least early on, the first few tiers would be very similar to the vehicles we have when it comes to other nations. And when it comes to top tier, they would become their own independent thing, they would have their own vehicles. Whereas Sweden, from the get-go, from the reserve tier, would have Swedish vehicles. It is definitely an interesting phenomenon, and hopefully explored by Gaijin and also other people if they're interested in the history of warfare. Now, the question always arises when we talk about new nations, when we talk about new tech trees. How about the old ones? How about parity? How about mechanics across the board? And this is something that I think has to at least be thought about when discussing these ideas. We've had a little bit of parity in the last updates. Supersonic stuff seems to be going across the board for at least the majority of nations. So, and also air-to-airs are kind of in the same boat. We had some AGMs added to different nations which aren't America. We had some other stuff such as radar-guided AA chucked across the whole place. We had some top-tier vehicles, put in the form of the Italian one, but bringing parity there. There's a lot of parity being added, But we also have some more on top of it, the Tunguska being one, and other things like this. So the question is it better to work on parity, or is it better to work on a new nation? And that will always be the overwhelming question for me. Is it worth fixing, well, not even fixing is the wrong word. Is it worth it bringing vehicles to pre-existing trees which would balance them out in terms of types of vehicles compared to other nations? Or is it worth just bringing in a new tech tree? What are people interested in, and what would people like to see? And this for me is a very much revolving question around my head, because I know in my mind all of these things, right? What I would like right now is exactly what I said at the start of the year when it came to that hopes video. I would like parity across the nations. I would like to see every nation get a naval tech tree, every nation get a helicopter tech tree, every nation have a balance of mechanics across the place, such as light tanks for every nation, or light armored cars for every nation, scouting vehicles. I would like all of these things much more than a new nation or a new tech tree. But the question is, am I in the minority? And I might be. You never know with these things. It's always hard to find collective opinion on really anything. It's always a tough road. But yeah, if you want to check out the Sparv, even though, it didn't technically exist, it is still interesting to go over these user missions, because it brings up more questions in my head than I have answers for, and therefore it brings more discussion than we had before. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Blackie for the support on Patreon.